What was your scariest experience home alone? I lived in an apartment by myself right after high school when I was about 19 years old. I had lived there for about a whole month when something truly horrifying happened. My front door was locked, top and bottom locks. I'm sitting in my living room watching TV when all of a sudden I hear keys going into my door locks and I see the locks physically start to turn. My body froze completely and my heart sunk into my chest. I did not have maintenance or anything else planned, nobody to come by and visit, etc. The door swings open and I see an older Asian man with bags of clothes and a few boxes. He immediately started screaming at me in a language I did not understand. He began repeatedly hitting me and he dragged me out of the apartment. He had me in a chokehold and finally my upstairs neighbor came down and pulled him off me. We called the police and long story short, by some bizarre mistake at the leasing office, they gave this man a key to my apartment and told him it was his. He purchased it before moving here and had only seen pictures of an empty unit. He assumed I was some sort of squatter in his unit. I was young and poor, I had a TV, a chair, and an inflatable mattress. I had almost no possessions at all, so I could see how he might have thought that I was there illegally. He was actually meant to get Unit 54, empty, when I was in 56, right next door. I was able to press charges on the man and also sued the apartment complex for them allowing a stranger to have a key to my door, which ended violently. He did not move in next door after the incident, and I actually stayed there an entire year rent-free. Was able to save some money and bought everything I needed as an adult. I also bought a pistol for my own protection shortly after. About 10 years ago my husband was gone overnight and I got an automated phone call sometime in the evening, after dark, from the county sheriff's department saying 2 inmates had escaped from the local juvenile detention facility. I live in a very rural area and this facility is only a few miles away, also in a rural area. And, the 2 escapees were not juveniles, for some reason, and they were armed. They had somehow overcome the officer and gotten his weapon. So there are helicopters circling the area for hours. I was on the computer, before I had a cell phone, all night messaging my local friends and trying to find updates. All the while the helicopters were still circling within a mile of my house. Bottom line, I turned on all the lights, barricaded the doors and sat up all night. I finally went to sleep when the sun came up. Most scared I've ever been. OMFG, I thought I would never get to share this. This happened when I was 11. My parents went on a date night and it was just me and the dog. There's a knock on the door. I peer out the window and see an unfamiliar man. I panic and run to the basement. I call my mom and panic. I hear the knock again. She tells me to calm down. As I walk back up, he has a cute little dog. BTW, I'm still on the phone. I panic because I think that he is trying to lure me out. This is how it went. Me, Mom, he has a puppy. What do I do? Mom, ignore him and make sure all the doors are locked. Me, wait, Mom, what? What is it? Answer me. Me, Mom, the dog looks like our puppy's name. Mom, confused sounds. Me, Git is our dog. Turns out our dog got out the open back door and ran after my parents' car. Our neighbor, who I didn't recognize because we just moved, found her running, saw her collar, noticed the address was next to his house, and brought her to me. My so works nights and wasn't home. I came home from a long night of gallery hopping with no dinner, lots of wine, and didn't eat enough food while I was out. Suddenly had a really strong blood sugar attack and ended up on the floor being barely able to move. Super sweaty and cold all over. Felt like fainting, only my heart hurt really bad and my whole body felt odd. I couldn't even move, get to the phone to call 911. About 20 minutes later, I finally was able to get to the fridge by crawling and got some OJ into me and a couple of bites of an old pie that was there. That got me strong enough to make a meal and get things back in order. Found out later that my whole system was out of whack and I have to have food about every 2 to 3 hours or it happens again. Hypoglycemia. I wasn't at home, but used to work in one of the older buildings on my campus. Former dorm turned office building. I was working on December 23rd, so nobody was there, lights were off, doors were all locked, etc. Once I turned our hall lights and sat up in my office with my dog, I went to sit at my desk and set up the computer. Right after sitting down, I heard footsteps down the hall, but didn't think much of it. They started to get closer to my door, so I looked over at my door to obviously see nothing. I listened as the footsteps went all the way down my hallway, and past my office. Once they passed my office, I walked into the hall only for the door at the end of the hallway to open and slam shut. As I watched, I flipped. It was my first time being alone for an undetermined time. I was maybe 16 or 17. My mom had to take my dad to a doctor in Alabama and took my sister with me. I had no idea how long they were going to be gone, so I'm sitting in the hall on the computer and our dog starts barking. Not like "Hey, squirrel, it's a squirrel," but deep, angry barking. Something is in my yard and it should not be here barking. I had the phone in my hand and went to check out the window looking towards where the dog was, plus to make absolutely sure the back door was locked. It was a box turtle. I had never heard this dog bark like this before, was pretty sure I was going to find a burglar or worse outside the door, and it was a freaking box turtle trying to get across the yard while the dog barked and snapped at it. I went outside and helped the turtle to the far end of the yard away from the dog, but he definitely earned some pats and treats for being that watchful over the house. Wasn't home alone, exactly, but everyone else was asleep, so I hope it still counts. I was pretty young, I'm assuming I was around 7 or 8, and I just got back from the bathroom. I had one of those canopy beds, and as I got in bed and looked in the direction of my door, I swear to God, I see this kid staring at me, straight up staring. For like 5 seconds, we stared directly at each other and then it looks like she ducked down and hid behind the end of my bed. So, at first I thought, for some reason, that my sister had snuck into my room to scare me. So I whisper her name and look behind the bed where the kid had hid. Nobody was there. To this day, I have no idea what I saw. I'm usually very skeptical about ghosts and stuff, but something about the whole experience rubbed me the wrong way. I used to walk home alone at night from work. Part of the path was this old wooden bridge that I had to cross over. At just the right angle and light level I could clearly see a ghost standing on the bridge looking at me. Looked kind of like the Grim Reaper without the scythe. It would quickly disappear once the angle changed. It was interesting because if you look at the scene in isolation there's not really anything there that resembles what I was seeing. But the brain is good at pattern matching. Give it certain inputs though and things go haywire. About 5 years ago, my Mill, who is a pediatric nurse, had stopped by for a visit one evening and told us about a patient she had been treating that passed away that evening. Sometime after she left, I was doing something in the living room when something at the top of my stairs caught my eye. When I looked up, I saw what appeared to be a small shadow figure dart across the entryway to the second floor. Kind of like it got spooked and was darting out of the way to hide. I wrote it off as my eyes playing tricks on me, but it did seem a little weird and my mind immediately went to the child my Mill told us about. I lived in a basement apartment that had 3 windows and one of them was in our living room, left side of house. Some guy, who I have no idea who it was, walked up to the living room window, had to walk around a big bush mind you, and started waving and saying hi. Then they went all the way to the other side of the house where my basement door was and started knocking on it saying, "Let me in." I was just trying to play Guitar Hero. Still to this day not sure if he was a drunk trying to get to my upstairs neighbor's house. Called the cops and he left before they could catch him. Lightning bolt hit the tree 10 feet out my window, as I was watching the storm from my bed. I was home alone, maybe 13 years old. It was the loudest sound I ever heard, and I admit, I went from loving lightning to being afraid of it, by only when it's close. The same tree got hit 2 more times in the following 10 years, also when I was home alone. I didn't know I was supposed to eat food with my medicine for the first couple weeks, and the first day I took it, I nearly passed out. My dad was at work, and I'm not supposed to call him unless it's his lunch break. But I called him anyways. He told me to eat some crackers and lie down. I felt better. Dads make everything better. When I was about 13, I had the house to myself. I pulled out some Oreo cookies just before I went into the bathroom and, when I came back 5 minutes later, they were gone. I never found the cookies. While I was at my grandma's house, she left to go to the grocery store, so I was at her house alone, playing my Wii. While playing, I hear noises coming from upstairs that sound like footsteps. I get really worried, so I walk outside for a minute or two to calm down, then walk back inside. A few minutes later, I hear more noises, and this time the noises are coming closer to the living room door. All of a sudden I see a person walking, and I let out a loud noise. Turns out the noises I heard were my grandma. She had never actually went to the store. I had misheard what she told me. When I was 22, my uncle showed up at my small one-bedroom bungalow. As always, every time any of my 4 uncles showed up, my heart sunk. To say that BV was messed up would have been the understatement of the year. He has always been a dodgy character, but the uncle I have the strongest relationship with out of the 4, personally for me the best of a bad bunch, and that's scraping the barrel. He, like the other 3, was a criminal at that point and associated with some pretty unsavory people. There was nothing new about that. None of the rest of the family have broken the law. My granda was a long-service soldier and a hard-working family man. Likewise, Gran gave birth to 9 babies, and in between those times had very responsible PA jobs in London. Their 5 daughters, although not having easy lives, and having their own personal troubles and tragedies, have all managed to grow up in the same house without breaking the law in any way, all supporting themselves, and their children by maintaining, again, very good, responsible jobs whilst raising us, their children to all, in one way or another, be high achievers and really good people with strong moral compasses. Back to BV, he had obviously been up to no good, as he was paranoid, jittery, and on edge. He was also using in a big way. I called my mom and she came around. I told BV he could stay the weekend, with 2 conditions. No stolen goods and no drugs. He agreed a little reluctantly and settled down. Mom decided to stay too in case it went pear-shaped. It did. The next day was Friday and my day off work. BV went out early. It was a lazy day. I was just doing a bit of tidying up. I was cleaning around a massive pot plant and stuff down inside it. I found a huge bag of suspect-looking white powder, which didn't look for personal use, various nasty-looking weapons and several nice-looking pieces of jewelry. I was very narked off, to say the least, but after showing Mom I left the dubious stuff where it was, as I needed time to think about what I should do. When BV got back from wherever it was he went, I asked about the items. He lied, as usual, saying that he had done a job, legal of course, for an old friend and that was his payment. I told him straight out I didn't believe a word he had told me, and that I wanted him and his stuff out first thing in the morning. The next day Mom and I got up and noticed BV was gone. I looked for the stuff and saw it was still there. Mom had to work that morning. She told me she'd be straight home after and I settled down for a quiet chilled morning. Around 11 a.m., there was a loud knock on the door, followed by someone having fun with a buzzer. As I use a wheelchair it takes me a bit of time to get to my front door if I'm alone, so I was getting more and more annoyed by the incessant commotion. On opening the door, I came face to face with the 3 of the meanest, nastiest, and skankiest men I have ever seen. They all looked straight ahead and because I was at a lower level their eyes went down to meet mine. To be fair, they all seemed surprised by my appearance. I was very small and skinny and looked more like 14 than 22. They all looked at each other in utter shock before I said, "Hello, can I help you?" The middle gangster, the nastiest looking one, said, "We're looking BV, sweetheart. Is he around?" One of the others said, "He said he was staying with a girl, my name." I was breaking inside but the sheer audacity of my uncle made anger took over my fear and made me braver. I said, "No, he's not around, he's gone, he won't be back, and that's me. I'm his niece." The 3 thugs looked really uncomfortable and shuffled looking at each other. I said, "Well? He has something of ours. Do you know where it could be?" The middle mean one asked. "Yeah, I'll get it for you. Wait there." I told the 3 of them and shut the door on them. As I did, I heard one of them saying, "That's low even for BV. You see her? She's a kid in a wheelchair." When I got back with their belongings I shoved it at the meanest one and said, "When you do see BV again, tell him from me if he even thinks about coming here again I'll call the police and that goes for you too." The mean one said, "He had our stuff, we had to get it back." I said, still blagging, "That's fine. I'm just saying what I will do." The 3 thugs nodded and left hurriedly. After they left, I was shaking all over. I was really scared and upset. When Mom got home I told her about the incident. She went ape. I know that at a later date she saw her brother and threatened him with something nasty if he ever came near me or bought his criminal scumbag mates around me again, and to give his due he never has. I was pretty young, and it was about 1 a.m. My cat came in, and immediately hissed at something across the room. Then, my cat ran away. I then felt something like a human walking across the floor, and stopped at the end of my bed. I just heard breathing, for about an hour. I then decided to get enough courage to look up, and I did. Nobody was there, but I still heard breathing. Checked under my bed, nothing. Checked my closet, nothing. Checked my bathroom, nothing. I then went to bed, not knowing what to do. I probably just hallucinated, but it felt pretty real. I don't suffer from anything, and that was the only time I hallucinated, unless my dog just came in and breathed like a human. Tornado came through the neighborhood. Took off part of the roof. We didn't have a basement. Could only sit in a doorway in the middle of the house and watch. Alone at night watching a B&W horror movie called Killer Shrews, huge dog-like creatures with 4-inch teeth menacing people trapped in a compound on a tropical island. For some reason a pile of books fell heavily to the floor in a nearby closet. If I could have jumped out of my skin. I was 14. My mom and twin were out of state, and early that morning, 4 a.m., my dad left to go to Italy for work. My gram was supposed to come pick me up that evening. I'd convinced my family I was grown enough that I could be on my own for a few hours, didn't need to spend the night before grams. 4:30, my cat wakes me up, which was strange, she was usually happy to just cuddle on my feet. And my brain says, hey, animals know when a quake is coming. And I roll off the bed and cover my head. I lived in California, so the house shakes, and the ceiling just comes down, slamming into my bed and the bookshelf near my headboard. Glass breaking, I can just hear things crashing. My cat stayed cuddled up with me in this little sheltered pocket. I was terrified, called my gram as soon as the sun was up. My best friend, her husband and I decided to get an apartment. It was a nice place, we all got on really well. It worked out great. After about a month we'd noticed food missing, that no one would own up to, but whatever, we all brushed it off. My roommate's cats had a tendency to destroy the blinds on the windows, so it had a nice section missing out of the window that looked out from our living room to our front steps. I was home alone, around midnight on a Wednesday. I was up late working on stuff for school in the living room. I'd been hearing weird noises all night, but brushed it off as the thin walls. After a while, I heard a noise out on the steps and looked over to see a man's face peering through the gaps in our front window. As calmly as I could, I got up and locked myself in the bathroom. I called the police and then my roommates, telling them they needed to come home. After some investigating, we found evidence that there was someone living in our attic, which had outside roof access, with a broken lock. We moved out of that apartment within a week. I heard something in my mother's room and was about to go in and check, until I realized I was home alone, so I thought 'FCKTHADSHIT' and went downstairs and called my mom. She came home and checked. There was nothing in there. I shit you not, Redditors. I had a knife under my covers, armed and ready. This thing still scares me. I was 10 at the time, and my mom and stepdad said we'll be back in an hour. They took 9 hours. They never told us what went on. Also not responsible to leave a 10-year-old home alone with their 12-year-old sister. I was about 11 and staying home alone while my mom and my older sister was out running errands. I was sitting in my living room watching TV when I heard two men arguing. It sounded like it was coming from my basement. My cat even woke up and started acting disturbed by the yelling. I freaked out. This was before cell phones. In my mind, the best thing to do was go hide in my sister's car that was in the driveway until my family returned home. After about an hour laying in the back seat of my sister's car, my family came home. I told them what happened and they called the cops. There was no sign of break-in and no men in the house. They just thought I must have imagined it. To this day I will never forget the screaming and the look on my old cat's face. I know I didn't imagine it. In the house that I'm in November this young woman knocked at our door. I recognized her from 3 years prior because she does this like clockwork every 3 years. She had her sleeves pulled up and all her arms were bleeding. She had cut all the way up her arms and through to her tendons this time. They were like spaghetti just hanging out of her arms. She was demanding that her ex-boyfriend let her see her kid. He won custody. She was very drunk and drugged and bleeding everywhere. The neighbors all came around and explained she was on meth and because she isn't sober she can't see her kid. I had to keep pressure on her wounds until an ambulance and police arrived. Her parents had driven down at this point and I could just see the disappointment in her mom's eyes. Her dad apologized profusely for her. I was just hoping she would get help, tbh. I hope in time she will get better. Lived with my aunt for a year and she would leave for business all the time. I swear her house is haunted and only did things when I was alone. A couple of times I'd go to sleep with my door open and wake up to it closed. Seen a girl in white walk into rooms. Front door would unlock itself and door would open. Bags of chips would be thrown from a box on top of the fridge. Would scare the crap out of me. A guy I work with has the same sort of thing happen every once in a while. His mother lived with him to help take care of his daughter, but she can't really do too much on her own, so more of a be there to call for help kind of helper. Anyways, one day he was watching TV with his daughter and she asked him to get her something from her room since she was trying to nap. He goes up there and finds her bed pulled a full 2 feet from the wall, almost blocking the door. His daughter is 2 and his mother is in no shape to move anything that heavy, so that's one of his stories. Another was he woke up around 2 a.m. because he needed to use the bathroom and wanted a drink. He goes into the kitchen and finds every single cabinet and drawer opened. Nobody else in the house is awake except him, and he would have heard his mother or daughter since his bed is right off the stairs and they squeak even at the slightest touch. Half of us call bullshit, but I'm on the side that's curiously freaked out, lol. In my old home I was hearing movement in the walls. Like it sounded like small do-it steps, and it got so bad I had nightmares over the sound. Lo and behold, it was a mouse in the walls. Scarred me for life. My husband was working nights and I was home alone with my children in a small town. Someone started banging on my door at 2 a.m. Everyone knew everyone, and my father-in-law lived next door, so I just opened it in a sleepy state. A man I've never met tried to walk into my house. I got the door closed just enough to block him. He had blood running down his face. For a moment, our eyes were within inches of each other. It was terrifying. After a struggle, I got the door closed. And he started yelling at me. He said he wanted to use my phone because someone hit him. I yelled through the door that I'd call 911, but he had to stay outside. When I dialed, he bolted off the porch. The next morning, I took my daughter to the bus stop, and while waiting in the car, this same guy jumps out of the bushes and onto my car, cussing me out and trying to get in. Pure panic. Turns out, he was on meth. The cops came and got him. I was almost 15. I lit a candle. My mom doesn't like vanilla scent, so I would light it when she wasn't home. I'd done it many times before. I still don't know how this happened. I went into the next room for a minute at most. And I came back to the curtain on fire, and I froze. I can't say how long I just stood there. I snapped out of it and called 911. I frantically looked for boots because it snowed that morning. And I grabbed the first coat I saw. I remember standing outside watching the fire trucks pull up. Next thing I remember is that I was in a kitchen I'd never seen before. It took me a while to realize I was across the street. I have no idea how I got there. We lost everything in the fire. I went into therapy because I kinda started to shut down. And sleep was hard. Legit nightmares and waking up extremely panicked. I'm 30 now. I have dreams about it once in a while. Especially walking back into the apartment where it happened. It was fixed and remolded. And I pass it a few times a month. I've wanted to just knock on the door and asked if I could walk around and see it. Because my last time inside was seeing everything burned. And the smell. Something that stays with you. While the fire itself was scary and traumatic, it's the fact most of that day and a day or two afterwards. I can't remember most of it. Not sure if this qualifies, as I wasn't all that scared. Was visiting my in-laws and dozing in the basement bedroom while everyone else was in church. Not really a churchgoer, they're cool with that. Started reading a book when I noticed someone was tinkering on the old piano upstairs in the living room. Odd, I hadn't heard anyone come home and it was a small house, hard for anyone to have gotten in without me hearing, but obviously they did, so I went upstairs as the person on the piano tried a weak chord or two, but then stopped when I got close. There was nobody home. Door was locked, and the piano was closed. Told my wife when she got home and she smiled at me sympathetically. Must have been a neighbor or something. Nope, it was definitely coming from upstairs, no question, and it wasn't a mouse or something, as it wasn't just random notes. Odd. Next morning my wife and I are lying in the same bed while my very Catholic in-laws are again at morning mass. We're reading and then, the piano again. Definitely from inside the house and not random notes again. We look at each other with raised eyebrows and listen for a bit. I think we can rule out the wind, I say. We go upstairs to check. Again, door locked and piano closed. Still wasn't all that alarmed, but it was pretty strange. Remember back when people thought the world was going to end or some shit back in 2012? Well, me and my siblings were home alone when the power went out. My parents came home to a group of children huddled around the table playing Clue, by candlelight, during a power outage, on the day the world was supposed to end. I wasn't totally alone, so not sure if this counts. I was with my older sister alone at home. My mom called us and told us our grandmother had gone off her meds. They were told she took the car and was heading to us. Granted, we lived 3 states away. My mom told us to lock all the windows and doors, and her and my dad were heading home as fast as possible. My sister and I did just that. We sat up in my sister's room. We heard a noise of the door and went downstairs expecting our parents. My grandmother got inside the house. She had a deck of cards and asked to play Go Fish with us. My sister locked me in my parents' bedroom and played Go Fish with Grandma. My parents made it home and Grandpa made the next flight out to drive her home. Yay, mental illness. I remember I was alone in my house. I lived in rural Texas, and we had a shooting not long ago at that time. So I was pretty scared being alone, especially at night. I had a tangled pair of friendship necklaces that I meant to give to my friend. They were tangled pretty bad. So, to calm myself down, I started untangling them. A minute or two later my phone in another room rang. I went there and it was an unknown number. I didn't pick it up and went back to the room with the tangled necklaces, but they weren't tangled anymore. They were perfectly straight and completely separate. Never figured out how that happened. Didn't sleep that night, either. Was home alone for a few days when I was 15. Parents visited relatives while I didn't want to go, and my grandparents, which lived in the apartment beneath and besides us. They were separated by a door, but it was basically one big house separated into an apartment and the house of my grandma and grandpa, left for the same reason. It was about 2 days of being home alone and I was upstairs watching TV when I suddenly heard something downstairs. It sounded exactly like the door which separated our apartment from the house was opened up, and I was scared as hell. I ran into my room and got a knife, as if a knife would help in that scenario, and looked through the rooms. There was nobody. After paranoid looking through every room in the house, I heard the front door closing. Ran downstairs and saw nothing. As I found out a few years later, it was my great-grandma looking for my grandma because she just felt like seeing her. She lived nearby and her Alzheimer didn't help her remembering that they drove away for a few days. Sitting in my kitchen late one night watching a movie. I was sitting in a chair that has its back to a window. I was watching a movie when I randomly heard this tapping on the window behind me. Almost like someone was tapping their nails on the window. I freaked out and turned around, not knowing what to expect. There I saw our next door neighbor grinning at me. She was looking for my parents. So instead of knocking on the front door or ringing the doorbell, she decided to go into her backyard and then to the window in the back, where she found me sitting watching a movie, and then decided to give me a mini heart attack. Oh, got this one, and it happened 2 days ago. I was about to go to bed, turned off my TV and game. It was pitch black in my front room. I ended up sitting on the couch poking around on the phone. Some dude opens up my door and halfway comes in my house. I quickly stand up. Just starting at each other. Once it hits me he's trying to rob my place. I grab a hammer and hit him with it. He runs out and I throw the hammer at the guy. It misses and goes in the back of passenger window. It was rolled down. I close up my house and lock up. Didn't notice at the moment that he unscrews my front porch light. Once I noticed that, I was like, yep, I'm staying up all night drinking. Called in the next day because, well, still a bit freaked out and honestly was still very drunk. I do not want to know what he was planning. My cat Freya woke me up at 4 a.m. meowing loudly, then again at 4:30 am when she threw up. The layout of the downstairs of the house my husband and I were in at the time was our bedroom on one end, which lead to the living room, dining room, kitchen as open plan, then the garage off the kitchen separated by a door we kept open. Freya's litter box was just inside the door. I got out of bed and turned on the living room light to see where the cat threw up, then headed to the kitchen for cleaning supplies. About 6 feet away from the open garage door I felt the most visceral terror I've ever experienced in my life. Without even realizing what I was doing, I started backing up, bumped into the stove and ran back to the living room, heart racing and terrified. I couldn't explain why I felt that way at all. I hadn't watched/read anything scary in months, didn't have a nightmare before waking, didn't hear or see anything, and have never had any problems in the house before, but I was more scared than I'd ever been. I still had to clean up the mess the cat made, so I turned on every light in the downstairs, ran to the kitchen sink, which of course was right next to the garage door, grabbed the cleaning supplies I needed and ran back, the whole time feeling like I was being watched from every direction. I cleaned up, turned the lights off and ran back to our room, where I immediately felt much better and like I had been a big baby. This whole time our cat was hiding under the bed and only came out when I was back, but she didn't leave the room for the rest of the night. The next morning Freya was meowing at the door to be let outside with a lot more enthusiasm than usual. I got up, went to the kitchen and felt completely fine being near the garage. When I went to clean her litter box, I realized she hadn't used it at all the night before, while she would usually use it 2 to 3 times in the night. She was fine using the box again a few hours later, but only went into the garage after she saw me do it. I have no explanation for WTF I felt or why, but it seems that Freya felt it too, and that makes the whole thing so much worse. Well, let me tell you. Wasn't alone, I was with a friend. It was windy outside, we were like 21. People took off their shoes when they came to our house. This stupid takes off his shoe between the step and storm door so it doesn't fully shut. TV was on, I was on the laptop, we were in the living room. From a weak resistance because of the shoes, wind slams the storm door, this dumb jumps stepping on the remote, TV changes to static, lights flickered and there was a loud boom from the backyard. We got so scared we both literally turned pale in seconds. We had to run outside. It took me a minute to figure out what happened, but boy, that was real-life movie scenario. Not necessarily at home, but one time my dad left me and my brother in the car when he got a haircut, and we were about 9 or 10 at the time. We were in a small parking lot right next to busy road in a sort of run-down side of town. We were just chilling in the car when we see a shirtless man jaywalking across and stumbling down the road in our direction about 500 feet down the road. We noted how odd and kind of funny it was. He kept getting closer and closer to where our car was parked, and it made me feel some type of way. I guess my brother felt the same way, and we did that thing that all kids do when they duck down behind the car door so outside people can't see them in the car alone. After a minute or two we felt the guy must have passed by already. I kind of stood on my knees on the floor of the car, and when I did, the guy walked right up to our shotgun window, which was open, with a curious and crazed look in his eyes. I happened to be sitting behind the driver's seat and he noticed me in the back. He looked right at me with the same crazed look for about a second or two while I looked back in stunned silence and then stumbled along. He was probably in his 50s with a scrawny build. He had dark sweatpants on and he seemed like he was on heavy drugs, crack from the looks of it. After it was over, my brother theorized that he walked up to our car trying to steal something but was scared off when he saw us. We thought about how much worse this could have been if he was more aggressive or had a weapon of some sort, as we were completely defenseless and he was clearly not in a stable state of mind. It was really scary. My dad said, I had a beach house in a very isolated spot of Montauk, and I had just seen the Blair Witch Project with a group of friends. They dropped me off at the dark, relatively isolated, unlighted house. I walked up onto the porch to find a cairn of stones, just like the one from the movie. When my neighbor broke into our house repeatedly every time our parents were gone, he would stand in the bush with a sharpened star picket and throw rocks at the house. He shot a crossbow bolt above my dad's head and my dad bashed the shit out of him, but the scariest time was he snuck in whilst no one was home but me and my younger brothers. He was walking into our bedroom about to get close to where we was sleeping and the alarm on the fridge started going off because one of my brothers left the fridge open. He then ran out of the house. When my family was out around the city, I stayed at home for the time being. It was like until a solid 10 minutes later, I heard the door, that had access to outside, slam open and I didn't hear any unlocking or anything. I thought my mom forgot something so I didn't give it any mind, but I heard footsteps that doesn't sound like my mom's. It was like they're wearing heavy boots. I was in my room at the time and I messaged my mom if she was home. She wasn't. The invaders' movements were a bit odd by sound. I mean, it was just footsteps up to my mom's room and nowhere else. I didn't hear any opening of doors, rummaging, or anything. Just footsteps. My mom said it was probably the neighbors from upstairs and I was just paranoid. She also suggested for me to check to make sure. I was sorta hesitant so I didn't do it. A little while after I heard footsteps again and the door slammed. It was just until my mom called up someone to check on me. They literally rang the doorbell and asked if I was chicken. I just laughed it off. I had no idea what happened at the time and my family joked about a ghost or something. It was just until next morning that my mom found out that her jewelry was missing. So yeah, if you're wondering about the aftermath, we've noticed that a lot of our neighbors started to increase their security with those cameras and stuff. Honestly, I wasn't scared and seemed unfazed, but my family was certainly unnerved and felt more unsafe. They had nightmares too. Okay, so, I used to babysit my younger siblings. I was a sophomore in high school and my parents went out. We lived out in the middle of nowhere. So, at night no one comes up to our road. We lived on a turnaround and we were the only house on the road. Well, the dogs started barking outside. Okay, no big deal. They usually bark at cows, coyotes, whatever. But we saw headlights coming up. Okay, it's mom and dad. No. That's not their car. It comes up to the house and sits in the driveway, for a few minutes. I'm kind of freaking out. Then it leaves. 10 minutes later it comes back. Gets up in the yard and sits there. I tell my brother and sister to come into my parents' room and hide in my dad's closet. I get his shotgun out, grab a few shells, do a safety check, everything my dad taught me, put the shells in my pocket, I don't load it, just in case, and I walk out. My dog is freaking the hell out at this truck. He's growling, barking, all that. I stand on the porch, with this heavy shotgun in my hand and call him. This truck is still facing me with its headlights on. My dog comes to my side and I cock the gun, aim. They speed off, I'm shaking, scared. I tell myself, remember red Toyota Tacoma, rear bumper missing, red Tacoma, rear bumper missing. I get inside, put the shotgun propped up by the door. And tell my brother and sister it's all clear. I was freaked the hell out. I started crying. That year 2 people were stabbed in their house 2 miles down the road. They were home sleeping when someone broke in. They both survived. Plus a house 10 miles down the road was robbed. This happened a few months apart. My parents didn't learn about it until my mom told someone she knew about what happened at our house. Scared all of us. But luckily my dad taught us kids proper gun safety and how to shoot. I guess for times like these. We always just thought it was something fun to do. We lived in the South, so it was common to have a gun, and to go out and shoot ski whenever. But damn, if I hadn't known how to intimidate someone with it, we'd have been okay. Plus thanks to my dog for probably scaring them too much to get out of their truck. No one wants to try a big German Shepherd. I was staying at my parents' house. They had gone out. It was after midnight and so stormy outside. I was feeling a little uncomfortable in a house that was slightly unfamiliar with the storm and the lateness. I thought I heard a voice but tried to deny it. A bit later I heard as clear as anything a voice saying bye-bye. And this musical tune, it was Eddington. The alphabet caterpillar that my dad bought 18 grandchildren ago and that we all hate because he just will not die. Eddington was speaking from the toy cupboard. Eddington is only supposed to talk when someone pushes one of his many legs. I do not believe in ghosts but fully expected to open the toy cupboard to find some ghost child playing with Eddington. Eddington was switched on. I switched him off and huddled on the couch till my parents came home. Everyone hates Eddington but I treat the dude with respect. I don't trust that grinning purple creep. I woke up to a sound of a door being opened extremely fast. I lay in my bed looking around my room and I saw a shadow of a guy standing in my room. My heart started racing super fast because a pedo was staring at me while I slept. I was trying desperately to control my breathing and slow my heart rate. Roughly 10 minutes went by and it felt like an hour, but the man had not moved at all. He was just standing there completely still. This was odd, so I decided to move towards him. I jumped out of bed and walked fast at him. But he wasn't there. I was looking at a shadow cast from my camp chair that was illuminated by my laptop charger light. Not alone, but everyone was asleep. When I was a kid of around 8 or 9 I had a small Hot Wheels metal trash can by my bed, a small single bed. Woke up one night from metal scratching noises, like claws scratching across metal, sounded exactly like it was coming from my trash can. I was petrified and couldn't move. Sound just kept getting more and more intense, not louder, just more frequent. After lying there for what seemed like forever, I was finally able to scream out for my dad. He came into the room and turned the lights on. He looked in trash can and nothing there and made me look. He says that I'm imagining things and to relax and go back to sleep. Just as he's leaving the room and turning out the lights, he hears the noise, Ends up that the screen cover over the little chimney for our electric furnace had come loose on the roof and a bird had gotten into the furnace, which was right behind the wall next to my bed. Lucky for the bird that it was summer and not winter. Only time I have been petrified to the point I couldn't move. The house I grew up in was haunted, like bad, to the point where it had to be blessed and all that. I have so many stories and have seen so much shit, man, but for the sake of Op's question, I'll give an appropriate response. This was when I was a bit older, I'd say 19 at the time, and used to smoke. I'd always go out on the front porch because it was less creepy than the back deck. About halfway through my cigarette I hear growling and panting, like deep ass breaths, quickly and aggressively approaching me. It was too dark for me to make anything out, so I just froze. Whatever it was, runs right next me then onto the driveway, and from there all I hear is its nails pattering on the concrete. It's like they were made of steel, and its breathing sounded like a person at the end of a marathon. That sound stuck with me for a while. To this day I still have no idea what it could have been, and if you knew where I lived, you'd know how hard it would be to even imagine it. But man, I still remember going back inside, looking in the mirror, and how pale my face was. From everything I've seen and experienced there, there's been really 3 instances that have been burned into my memory. This was one of them. I still remember every detail clear as day, 10 years later. My grandpa lived with us for the last 3 months of his life. He'd had a mild heart attack, is there such a thing? And as he was a wandering spirit and hadn't held down a permanent address in years, check your mental health friends, he slept on our sofa. I was 13. My parents ran to the farm, Dad's parents' place, about 15 miles from my house. Grandpa told me he was tired and went to lie down. About 20 minutes after he lay down, he called me in and said the path is clear now, I can go. As soon as your mom gets home, I can go. I was confused and told him he lived with us now, he didn't need to go. He rolled over and went back to sleep. My parents came home an hour later and Mom didn't even have her shoes on yet when Grandpa called out for help to the bathroom. They were helping him across the living room and he collapsed. Dead before he hit the ground. It took me years to tell my mom the words he said. So, while I wasn't alone when he passed, it's only because he waited for me not to be. I was home alone around 12 years of age. My dad was gone often, on dates to heal from the divorce which he caused by cheating. I remember being outside in the driveway looking up in the sky. The air was warm but calm. I've never seen a sky look green. Then I watched the clouds start to turn in a circle. I hauled ass inside, and shortly after a tornado formed and stuck down very close to the house. I remember the familiar freight train sound. Thankfully it was short-lived and an F1. My home being broken into when I was 22, my family had gone on holiday and I was home alone for 2 weeks with the cat. My bedroom was at the back of the house on the first floor and it was the middle of summer so I slept with my window open. On the 4th night my family were away. At 3 a.m., I heard the sound of someone trying to open the back door. For reference, it's one of those double PVC doors, you have to open one before you can open the other and they were trying the wrong one first. I heard them shake the first door, unlock the correct one, a yell and a laugh. I then heard the keys being shaken, thrown on the table and then footsteps of these people walking quickly through my house and then the sound of footsteps on stairs. I was petrified. So scared I couldn't move. I could barely breathe. My poor cat then came into my room and collapsed on the floor. I came to my senses and turned on the light. They had a lookout in the garden who shouted out when they'd seen the light turn on and then I heard these people run away. The yowl I heard had been from the kicking/hitting my cat who had gone to investigate the noise of the back door being opened. She had then run up ahead of them to my room. For the next week and a half I could barely sleep not knowing if these people would come back and the police weren't able to find any fingerprints, even suggesting I had imagined it all. Turns out a man from my mom's work had heard her saying she was going away and decided to arrange for some of his friends to break in to steal her jewelry. He was found out when he told someone else from their work about his plan afterwards. One time when I was little, not sure how old, maybe like 10? My dad was the only adult home with myself, my sister, younger by 2 years, my brother, younger by 6 years, and a cousin who was my brother's age. He told me that he was gonna go to the store really quick and was gonna BRB. First time I'd ever be home without an adult. To the left of the front door was the washer/dryer as well as a small bathroom and a living room and everything else in the house was to the right of the door. So he leaves and 5 to 10 minutes pass when suddenly someone starts banging at a window to the right. I instantly panic of course, and my young brain had a game plan apparently lol. I quickly put my siblings and cousin into the tub of that small bathroom and closed the door, ran to the kitchen and grabbed a knife, grabbed the house phone and pre-dialed 911, and stood at the front door waiting to see if someone would bust it down or something. About a minute or so later, my dad returns and unlocks the door to little me standing there with a knife and phone while the younger kids are in the tub and starts laughing. He was the one banging on the window to see what we'd do. Something is truly wrong with this man. I lived alone at time. It was the 4th of July. I wasn't feeling well, so I was having a quiet holiday at home. I was just sitting in a chair, reading, with my cat on my lap. It was totally quiet, no TV or music playing. All of a sudden my cat wakes up and looks at the door. The door had an L-shaped door handle. I watch as the door handle ever so slowly and silently moves from the 3 o'clock position to 6 o'clock. Thankfully I always lock my door when I'm inside. I quietly walk over to the door and say, "Can I help you?" I didn't look through the peephole. I just had a feeling that if I did I would see somebody trying to look through it at me. Just as silently and slowly the door handle returns to the resting position. A few seconds later I hear the door to the stairs open and close. I don't know if someone was hoping to find unlocked and unoccupied apartments to rob or unlocked and occupied apartments to catch people unaware and do who knows what. I was freaked. It was so deliberate and felt targeted. I lived in a secure building. You needed a key or a code to get in. Though there were always people propping the door open or who gave their friends their code, I lived on the 3rd floor of a 3-story building. There was no cross-traffic in the hall as I was at the end of the hall. The only people who passed my apartment were the people who lived across the hall. That it was 4 p.m. on a sunny afternoon seemed to make it worse somehow. Also, my cat got extra treats for her badass watch kitty skills. Thanks for the alert, Daisy. I wasn't exactly home alone, just me and my brother, but I was upstairs and he was in the basement. This crazy thunderstorm had rolled into the area and my parents wanted to go drive in it and my sister went with them. Anyways, it's coming down pretty hard and there's this really bright flash of lightning. This is during the day, so the fact I saw it so well meant it struck really close. An instant later a giant crack of thunder boomed through the whole house. My sister had this princess doorbell on her bedroom door and the thunderstorms caused it to go off. I immediately thought it was a power surge since the lightning was so close. Then I realized that her doorbell was battery operated. At this point my brother was checking on me because he thought for sure we got hit. He saw me standing in the hall looking at her doorbell. I told him it went off by itself. He assumed it was the vibrations from the boom, so he took the button off the wall and tried shaking it as hard as he could to prove the thunder had caused it to vibrate enough to go off. However, it never happened. We asked my dad to try it when he got home and nothing. It's possible the static electricity set it off. A tree right near us got snapped in half by lightning, so I assumed that was it, but it still freaked me out for a few years. Had been to see an alien horror movie. Stopped at grocery store on the way home to my apt. Parked in a dark area and carried in some bags. Came back out for more bags. When I pulled the door handle, a cat jumped out of my car through the open sunroof. I have 3 stories, but I wasn't home alone. I was at work alone. So, for background, I work for a non-profit organization and I'm an active board member for the Royal Canadian Legion in my town, and because I'm a board member, my organization got really cheap office space in the Legion. I work alone. My head office is in the provincial capital and I'm in a satellite office. First story was 2 years ago. We, the Legion, had been set up at a networking conference and we had a bunch of stuff on display. Old, deactivated, guns, army helmets and uniforms, and 2 World War II hand grenades. We packed everything up and brought it back after it was over. I sent the volunteers home and sat in the main office sorting stuff and putting it away. As I'm going through stuff, I realize the grenades are missing. I go through everything again. Nope, still can't find them. I went through everything 5 or 6 times and the whole time I'm searching for them, I'm becoming hyper aware that something is watching me. Hair standing up, super alert. I kept looking at the open door because I just know something is watching me and it's pissed. I was alone. I had turned off the alarm when I got there and I locked the door behind the last volunteer. It should be said, I knew I wouldn't be in trouble for the grenades going missing. They're actually fairly easy to replace. I was upset something was stolen, but not worried or anxious about it. But whatever was watching me was pissed I couldn't find them and I could feel it. I finally got up the courage to run out the door, didn't even set the alarm, just left. As a funny note, I called the branch president and told him they were missing and all he said was to make sure they weren't somewhere in my car if I had to cross the border. Second story happened last year. I was struggling with insomnia and a serious medical issue that caused a lot of pain. I worked it out with my manager that I could flex my hours and come into work when I was feeling up to it as long as I got my work done. This meant I was in the Legion at all hours. 2 a.m. and I couldn't sleep? Alright, head into the office and get some shit done. One morning around 4:30 I get to my office, walked in, turned off the alarm and realized I hear voices in the clubhouse, restaurant/pub area the vets and civilians hang out in. I thought the server must have left the TV on because I could hear what sounded like several men having a conversation but I couldn't hear what was being said. I pushed the door open to turn off the TV and it was silent. Like dead silent and dark. I just said okay then. Closed the door, sprinted up to my office, locked myself in and turned on loud music. Last story, a funny one. This happened about 2 months ago. We had a pretty horrible flood here which resulted in just under 6 feet of water on the main floor. My office is on the second floor and was okay. We had to completely strip everything down to the studs and it took about 3 months before I was allowed to go back to the office to work. I was there alone on a Saturday and I heard someone walk up to my door. I looked up because the branch president said he might swing by but there was no one there. Figured it was my imagination, finished what I was doing about an hour later and got ready to head home. I had to step between the wall studs to get out because of the construction on the first floor and as I did I felt my shirt pull backwards. I went weak. I don't have a flight or fight response, I have a faint response. According to my military friends, this is a flight response, it's just a really bad one. I slowly turned around to see my shirt had caught on a screw. The chef claimed to see a little girl wandering around when he was there alone. I never saw her. But the building used to be a school in the 60s so maybe he did. So when I was about 7 my mother would drug me with high doses of Benadryl to make me fall asleep my entire childhood. Benadryl high consists of paranoia, hallucinations, delusions, delirium, full-on terror. You see scary freaking stuff and can't distinguish it from reality, so she drugged me and left for the night and I couldn't sleep so I was awake and conscious as shadows creeped towards me, giant spiders littered the walls, demons and shadow people peeked at me from every corner and I was so terrified I couldn't move as a grudge-looking thing crawled on the ceiling. All alone in a house in the middle of the woods all night, not knowing I was drugged, not knowing I was hallucinating, and the real terror was that my mother would eventually come home. Not so scary as I got used to it over time but something would consistently lock my bedroom door while I was inside it. I'd go to leave and the door would be locked while I'm the only person inside, and once or twice was locked while I was outside. I was about 11 years old and we lived in a condo. My mom had gone to hang out by the pool in the complex so I was home alone. There was a knock at the door. It was an older teenage boy, 16, 17 maybe, selling magazines for his school. I said no thanks. He started getting extremely pushy and said he was going to put me down for a trial of the magazine without having to pay and then I could pay if I liked it. I said no and was extremely uncomfortable but he wasn't letting me shut the door, he was blocking it with his arm. Then he said he needed to borrow a pen. Instead of letting me get him a pen, he forced his way into the condo. By then I was really freaking out. I was so scared I didn't know what to do. I wanted to run out but my dog was in the house and I didn't want to leave my dog alone with a potentially dangerous stranger, so I just stood there in shock and terror while this guy went over to my computer desk and got a pen. He really did just need a pen and he left afterwards without incident. I know it's kind of tame compared to some of these stories, but it really scared the hell out of me. I was shaken up for the entire rest of the day. He was probably just some awkward teenager with bad social skills and didn't know how scary he was being. But I still remember the incident years later and how scared I was. I don't even like opening the door now. When I was hanging out in the basement of my house, and I heard some rattling outside. I was about 11 at the time. I opened the door, and there, standing on the porch, was a black bear. Granted it was pretty small and looking back on it I probably could have just yelled and it would have run away but it was very spooky. In high school, home alone on a Saturday night, at my house in the middle of nowhere. I look out the window and there's a truck parked in the driveway with its lights on. I watch it for a minute and just as I'm about to go investigate, A man gets out and starts walking toward the house with a shotgun. Turns out my dad gave him permission to hunt on the property and didn't think to mention it to me. I wasn't home alone but in a motel room all alone. Earlier in the day as I was on my way to the laundry, a man passed me and blurted out "I love you." I ignored him as I thought it was pretty strange as I had never seen him before. He was much younger than me and I had a strange sensation about it. That night I got ready for bed and made sure I locked the door to my room and put the safety chain on. I woke up at 7 to the alarm and was surprised to find that the door to my room was open but the chain was still on. I could see daylight through the 2-inch gap in the door which opened onto the street. I was a bit worried as I was sure that I had locked the door. I closed and locked it, got dressed and went on to the out-of-town job we were working on. I returned to the motel with my crew about 6 that evening. We were surprised to find that the motel was crawling with police cars. Apparently a young woman had failed to turn up for a vital job at an out-of-town convention she was attending. No one had heard from her and her phone was going straight to voicemail. We were all questioned about her, but no one had seen her and we didn't know her. Later that evening her body was found bound and discarded in the retention pond behind the motel. The following day the maintenance man was arrested for her murder. I was shocked to find that this was the man that told me he loved me as he passed me at the motel. Months later, at his trial it was disclosed that he had used his passkey to get into her room. She had failed to put on the chain before she fell asleep. Chills ran across my body as I read this information. I never stayed alone in a motel ever again. Center. It's about 1 to 2 a.m. and both my dogs start barking. I grab the baseball bat, flip on the front porch light, and look out the door's peephole. Absolutely nothing there. Until suddenly my view through the hole turns pitch black. My blood runs cold and I jump back. All I can think in my head is that whoever was out there just put their hand over the peephole. I give my dogs the go-ahead to bark it up some more, intimidation factor, and I check again in a few minutes. Nothing. There are only a few possibilities. Mystery man messes with me and runs when he hears the dogs. A large moth lands on the peephole at the worst time and scares my pants off, or both my dogs, and I momentarily lost it. It was nighttime and my parents and brother were out doing something, I forget what, and for some reason, an overwhelming sense of dread filled me and I locked all the doors and windows. To this day, I don't know why, but then my parents and brother came back. It's the middle of January in the PNW. I am home alone for the week while my parents are in Chicago. Every day I walk down the driveway and to the end of the street and pick up the mail. When I get back to the house I set it on our dining room table. Midway through the week I went to a friend's house late in the night. I ended up staying there until about 3 a.m. When I got home I parked my car in our garage, walked into the house through the laundry room and into the dining room. I instantly was terrified. 3 days of mail that was piled up on the table was scattered throughout the room. I walked into the kitchen and the back door was wide open. I live in a pretty woodsy area, so when I looked outside I just looked into the trees. Luckily no one was still in the house by the time I got there, but I spent the next hour with the baseball bat checking every nook and cranny. I didn't sleep that night, that's for sure. 2 weeks later we started getting calls from the bank because this person stole a bunch of credit card info and was trying to buy a bunch of stuff online. I was sleeping over at the house of my GF's parents at that time. Rest of the family was in vacation, so we were all alone for sure. In the middle of the night, I woke up by a really loud rumbling noise. Like someone pushed over a cupboard, but since it woke me up I had no idea how exactly the noise sounded and where in the house it came from. I don't normally wake up by any noises, had been sleeping with an open window close to train trails for years, so I was in high alarm state. I grabbed a 1-liter water glass bottle next to the bed to yield as a club if needed and went looking through the entire house with my heart pumping like crazy. I couldn't find anything. Mostly looked at every window if someone broke one to get in. Nothing. It was hard getting back to sleep. The next day we discovered all the shampoos and stuff of the entire family was laying around on the bottom of the shower in the bathroom. It was a shower cabinet, closed shower which multiplies the sound, right on the other side of the wall to our sleeping room. The shelf inside the shower has been held by suction cups for years and just decided to get too loose in the middle of the night. During the night that noise was so incredibly loud that I didn't even think it could have been on our floor. I immediately checked downstairs. When I was like 9 or 10, I was home from school from a chest infection and I'm just watching some cartoons or something and I look outside and it's dark, Like actually pitch black, and I'm thinking I thought it's only lunchtime and it was like this for the whole day. And Jay told my mom about it and she didn't notice. To this day no one believes it happened. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.